Quiet, please. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Literific. If you're new, we are the Debating Society at Queen's. We have 4 speakers each side on tonight's debate, so we'll have to be a bit quicker than usual. But before we get to that, it's my pleasure to introduce council announcements for today. Does anyone have any council announcements? I'll also ask you to introduce yourself because there's so many new people here today. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
I'm Talisha McSpard. I'm external convener of the society who I convene externally. Which is just basically organise other competitions with universities and stuff like that. And speaking of competitions with other universities, tomorrow for a fiver, you can go down to Dublin to the Royal Irish Academy to see the semi-final of the Irish Times. We leave 1:45 from Lanyon. You can sign up as soon as possible because it's tomorrow, and you get to see some of Ireland's best debaters.
Some of Ireland's
debaters.
Thank you very much. So if you want to sign up, there are still some spaces left. Does anyone have any other council announcements? Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
I'm Hamill, I'm the outreach officer, so I reach out in my office. So on the 27th of February, we have the NI Schools Debating Competition, which is going to be Northern Ireland's biggest, best and highest class debating competition for schools. As a result, I need sign-ups for volunteers, judges, people that will help get students to and from rooms. We need people to help register. I'm going to need probably a couple of swing speakers as well, so if you've never debated before and you want to think, maybe, oh well, I could debate with 16-year-olds. Why not? So if you want to sign up to really help out, I would really appreciate it. If you do, I'll buy you a pint at some point, but I'm really broke, so it will not be tonight. So yeah, please sign up. I would love to see you all to help out. It will be quite a big event. We're hoping to get sponsors, and we're really hoping to have what is going to be Northern Ireland's best debating tournament in recent memory. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other? Yes, name for the minutes, please.
So I'm Ryan, the social officer. It's my job to get you to go to the pub after the debate. Also, in terms of the Talisha's announcement, if you want to sign up for the thing tomorrow, the sign up form is in our bio on our Instagram. So if you want to know where to sign up, that's where it is. On Monday, we have drug debate, which is going to be a
disaster.
quite possibly, but it's in the Wee Bar in the Union Bar. So come along on Monday at 7 PM to hear people debate about hentai and whether we should unite Ireland under the
Or
crown.
don't, please don't.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Finally, yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Hiya, I'm Ellie. I'm the internal convener, so I make the debates on the term card and I force you to speak in the debates as I force all these lovely people here around me. And also the person who came up with the debates for drug debate. Well, one anyway. It's a mystery to guess which one. Probable joke. So anyway, as I was saying, I need people to sign up. So next week's debate is this house believes technology will destroy the world. Apocalyptic, energy, robots, whatever you think, that will be in that debate. So I have 2 spaces on the proposition. So if you want to argue that technology will destroy the world, whether you, as I said, believe robots are going to take over, that your Alexa is going to kill you in your sleep, or whether climate change and oil companies are going to drive us into doom, sign up. Let me know after the pub, or in the pub, sorry, after the debate, and I will sign you right up. If it's your first debate speaking, do not worry. The opposition is full of first-time speakers, so you will be completely grand. You're not going to be going against someone like Dermot, who's a competition speaker, and would scare the shit out of you. But it's very newbie friendly debate as well for main speakers if you're wanting to get involved. You may as well just say fuck it, you're at uni, and that's me. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Right. It is my great pleasure to welcome Josie to read the minutes from the previous meeting. Please give Josie a massive round of applause, please.
Hello everyone, my name's Josie, and for anyone who's new, I'm the secretary of the society, so essentially I write the minutes for the week before, I come up and I just retell it. Just a forewarning, last week's debate was a little bit, it's not the usual kind of debates we do, so if the minutes sound extremely batshit, then I'm very sorry, but it was a lot of fun to write, so thank you to all the speakers for last week. So, on the 19th of January 2023, the Queen's University Belfast Literary and Scientific Society convened for its 30th ordinary meeting of the 174th session for the motion, "This House believes the Oscars are rigged." As usual, the meeting began with announcements. Taoiseach McSparran announced a trip to Dublin for the Irish Times debate on the 27th of January. Ryan Hoey, HLM, presented the charity social in the Wee Bar on the 30th. Dermot Hamill announced that on the 27th of February, the Literific would be holding the NI Schools debating competition, needing student volunteers to help run it, which, if anyone can, that'd be absolutely amazing. After the announcements, Dermot Hamill made a speech thanking the House for their support during the Irish Times debate. Once the minutes had been read, the House turned to private members' business. Dermot Hamill asked the House whether it is time to get rid of the SU. Responses were heard by Danny McCormick, James Orchin HLM, Ellie Byrne HLM, Sam Hazlitt and Kiriswell HLM. Noah Barney presented Prince Harry's Todger and his insensitivity when moaning about issues considering the cost of living crisis.
It wasn't like that.
It was.
Responses were heard by Jack Hanlon, Kiriswell HLM, Luke Maguire and Danny McCormick. President's questions then commenced. Dermot Hamill stated that the President looked dapper in his suit during the Dublin trip and asked whether the sentiments were reciprocated. The President said that he only had eyes for Dermot's suit the whole time. The vote of prior opinion then took place. There were 13 votes for aye, 8 votes for nay and 15 abstentions, so the proposition had it. First on the proposition was Jack Hanlon. Jack presented his own Oscar-winning script to illustrate the way in which the award is rigged. In his film, Brad Pitt is a wheelchair-bound painter in France who falls for a female lead just big enough to pass the Bechdel test. He admitted his arousal when the good guy beats the bad one in films. Jack proposed that we should allow him to create his own award show to reward films that truly deserve them, as well as punishing all of the scum lizard people such as Roman Polanski, Jared Leto and Mel Gibson. First on the opposition was James Orchard HLM. James began by shifting around the house's furniture and straddling his chair. With a fake cigarette in hand, he started...
It was mine.
We don't propose smoking in this society.
Yes, we do.
He started his presentation with a picture of acting god Nick Cage. He discussed a very odd 5-hour-long film which included scatting and laugh soundtracks. I have to admit, I'm not completely sure how this relates to the motion, but whatever floats your boat, James. With 10,000 members in the Academy, it would be absurd to think that a vote could be rigged. He concluded that the Oscars aren't rigged. The films are just crap nonsense. Second on the proposition was Rory McSparran. Rory stated that the Oscars apparently pick and choose, and that this is not a fair fight. Presenting Alvin and the Chipmunks, Rory demonstrated how this film deals with heavy social issues that would otherwise be a goldmine for the Oscars. However, they won't admit how great of a movie it really is. Uncle Ian's progression through 3 stages of life, be it within 30 days, which has audiences on the edge of their seats. Another masterpiece overlooked by the Oscars was the Scooby-Doo live-action remake. According to Rory, the reason for its loss was because all the Academy judges were allergic to dogs. With tears in his eyes, he asked, "Why am I reading this?" about his own speech. Second on the opposition was Taoiseach McSparran. Taoiseach sees herself as an Oscar expert and reminded the House that she had threatened to resign if the motion had not been put on the term card. She was then presented the Oscar for the Best Rat Representation in a debate by Dermot Hamill, our very own expert on the subject. Tauscher argued that the same masterpiece, Fight Club, has won consecutive Oscars as it translates into the film into multiple languages. This year's being in Irish, better known as The Banshees of Inisherin. Twilight, which should have won an Oscar, mirrors our own struggles as a society, as we are like the Cullens and the SUs of Volturi. Final on the proposition was Ellie Byrne HLM. First, they proposed that the Oscars are in fact rigged, as Leonardo DiCaprio won one for an extremely boring film about him walking in the wilderness with a bear. Ellie claimed that the Oscars is a billionaire's boy club, in which children of wealthy stars win the award after creating acid-induced films. Ultimately, they concluded that the only good thing about the Oscars is when rich white people get dressed up nicely by gay stylists. Final speaker on the opposition was Dermot Hamill. Dermot began by citing one of the greatest scripts ever written. Top Gun is a story of a man struggling with his own homosexuality. Maverick is on the edge, and Iceman and his crew are gay. He argued that this is essentially what the Oscars are all about. Dermot demonstrated through an extensive examination of the Oscar-winning masterpiece Ratatouille that even a rat, and a French one at that, can achieve this prestigious award. It is ultimately about everyone having a fair chance to make a top-tier film. He then went on to rebuke the proposition in a very personal manner. Questions were then heard by Daniel McCormick, Kira Swell HLM, Brian Hoey HLM. Votes on speakerability took place. There were 0 votes for the proposition, 40 votes for the opposition, and 0 abstentions. So the opposition definitely had it. May I take the minutes as read?
Quiet, please. Thank you very much, Josie, for reading the minutes. It's now our turn to turn our attention to private members' business. So this is your opportunity for new members. If there's something in the news, if there's something that you want to get the House's thoughts on, this is your opportunity to do so. So if you have one, you can raise your hand now. I will have to set the timer before I do that because I forgot to do that 2 seconds ago. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Dermot Hamill, rat whisperer. Mr. President, members of the House, it's very clear that we've all seen what happened with QUB Love this
Oh,
week.
God.
And there was no avoiding our wonderful little job form, our wonderful praise, our fans, our haters, those that love us, those that slightly fancy us, those that wish us all disbanded. But we cannot ignore the interesting questions on your dear presidency, Mr. President, and the job form that asked whether or not we should call for a no confidence. I first of all would say that this was a fairly cowardly attempt to remove a president. If you're going to knife him fucking front.
I've done that already.
So I will say that. I will secondly say that
You've not got much time left, so you gotta hurry up.
you will not censor me.
I can try.
I'd also point out that if you're going to try and coup someone, the job form on QUB Love is not the most effective way of running a coup. I mean, Jesus Christ, Americans stormed the Capitol. And the Literific stormed Facebook. But I will just have to say, whoever it was a fairly cowardly move. If you're going to do it, I mean, just don't. But if you have to, do it fucking right.
Thank you. Any thoughts on this topic? Oh God. Yes.
Very
State your name for the minutes, please.
Daniel McCormick, I don't know if anybody else is sort of spending something. The enthusiasm with which you're putting this down Was it you, Rob?
No, it's
I
proper
can I
English.
reply to
It won't be
that?
I don't know if you can, but I think you will anyway, so there's no real, I can't really stop you. Yes, your name for the minutes, please.
On a slightly more serious note, because obviously the job form infamous post, which I'm pretty sure we all have seen my response under, the one before it was saying about different points of views in Literific, and as someone who does the sign-ups, I try and make sure that there are different views and stuff. Our council is mixed in terms of left and right views. So I sign up, who signs up, so do you know what I mean? If you want your side of the opinion voiced, please sign up. We also have, training workshops if you don't feel comfortable right now. And second of all, rather than go to QUB Love, which I completely understand in terms of if you have any concerns about the society, it doesn't exactly help us as a society actually tackle any issues. So if you have any genuine concerns or issues with the society, with discrimination, with not being heard, we have an appointed welfare officer, and Theo, I'd like you to stand up please and make yourself known to members. This is Theo. Theo is a welfare officer. If you feel that you've been discriminated against in any of our meetings, if you feel that maybe we're praising one view and really discriminating against another view, and you don't feel comfortable stating your opinion, or if you feel sexually harassed or discriminated against or made uncomfortable by anyone here, whether you're attending for the first time, whether that person doesn't attend all the time, or even at our social events, Theo is the person to go to, and he will advocate on your behalf anonymously to council. We will not know your identity through stages step 1 and 2 of the SU guide on welfare complaints to societies. So we do have a system that I put a lot of effort into last year to write up and put in our constitution, and I would hate for anyone to not use that system that we put there in place. So while I guess we can joke about QUB Love and the society, it's a yearly thing, every year we get shit on QUB Love, it's just a fact at this point. But in all genuine seriousness, if there is any genuine or serious concerns, please do go to Theo or a member of council if you don't want to go to Theo. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, that's a really important point. Also, everyone should feel welcome to attend Literific, no matter who you are, no matter what your views are, no matter what your perspectives on anything are. Anyone should be welcome to attend, and that's really important. So if you personally have any issues at all, please come to myself or anyone else on council or Theo. It's always there, and we're always happy to take any questions that you have. If you have any further thoughts on this topic, QUB Love, whatever the hell it is, you can say them now. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
To be honest, it was, this attempted coup is really, I had a lot of fun with the form, and I think at one point I sent the entire script of the B movie in. As evidence of why you are incapable to be president. But I mean, ultimately, I do think, in the interests of fairness and democracy, we might be able to put a motion of confidence in you this evening. If anyone's interested in seconding it.
Right, are we going to have a vote? A vote of confidence?
Order?
No.
Yeah.
What?
It's constitutionally not
Insignificant.
Not proper to do a vote of confidence.
It's a vote of confidence.
A vote of confidence?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just read that.
If you have confidence in my ability to continue on as president, you can raise your hand now.
Matthew, close your eyes.
Whoa!
Close your eyes. Because, yeah, just do it.
Turn around.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, genuinely.
Why? Turn around, go ahead. Close your fucking eyes. Shush.
We're gonna kneecap you.
If you have confidence in my ability to continue on, you can raise your hand now. If you do not. Oh, you're confident. Can I also vote for myself? Turn around.
She's taking 12 months since
Yeah, I'm going against fucking.
Oh, Daniel!
I'm saying this is unconventional. I don't know why.
We should have done this already.
Someone's not going to like it.
Wait, James, get the sword. If you do not have confidence in my ability to continue on as president, you can vote now. All right. Why?
Oh, that is a lot of people.
Can you give me 5 minutes here to count this?
Don't worry.
That's more than I would expect.
just.
Ellie, it's not acceptable to put both your arms up.
Okay, right.
If you want to abstain on the motion, you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand now.
Yeah, no.
It's banger.
Do we?
Up the SU!
Quiet. Do we have the numbers on that? Do I want to know?
We're doing a recount.
We can only rig the vote.
Georgia!
We can only rig the vote once. We can't do it 2 years in a row.
Why not, Joe Biden?
No. Do we have the numbers on that?
The comment is there were a few hanging chads.
There were, so in the vote of confidence for the president, there were 61 votes for and I. Am I right? So,
You got the wrong way around, Susie.
Fuck now.
Yeah.
You fucking abstained, didn't you?
Oh, hey!
Get for myself.
okay, sorry, I just got that wrong.
This is why we're broken on you.
Okay, there were 61 votes for I, 2 abstentions and 0 against.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, say your name for minutes, please. I know this is the last point on this one.
Now there may have been some confusion there. Why is a member of council not voting in favour of and abstaining on that motion? And I was at the SU yesterday and I picked up this SU branded notepad and this SU branded pen. I have now joined the dark side. So that is the reason why.
Right.
I refuse to work.
And I'm working at the SU.
Good. At least someone is. Yes. Any other different points of private members' business so I can move on? Yes. Thank you. State your name for the minutes, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Kirsty Wheel. So essentially, I was watching French news today because I because for those of you who don't know, I'm fluent in French. I was watching French news, and essentially what happened in France recently was they held a kind of like a sexism study. So across the kind of nation, they asked various peoples from different backgrounds kind of questions and what their opinions on it were. And the kind of results from the study shocked me. So apparently 15 to 35-year-olds are actually the most sexist. And they also found that, so among 15 to 35-year-olds, approximately 22% of them thinks it is okay to slap their partner. And the second thing was, it was something like 20% thinks women are in part to blame if something bad happens to them.
Really?
It was awful. I watched the news and I was shocked. Now they think various things about this, and obviously this is localized to France. But like, I'm wondering if people have any opinions on it. If you don't and you don't want to speak about it, that's fair enough.
Yeah. Any opinions on this? Yes. State your name for the minutes, please.
Roisin Keenan. As you all know, I'm a raging sexist, so it's not shocking for me at all, at least anyway. I literally have debates on sexism every day, unfortunately, because it's just part of my role. And I think the difference is the overtness versus covertness of sexism. So with the older generations, it's more like staunched in traditionalism and the way they were reared, the way they grew up, etc. And it's more of like a covert, under the surface sort of thing. With this new generation, they're growing up and they're listening to Andrew Tate and they're slipping down the Reddit pipeline and all that sort of crack. I know a few of you in here on that anyway.
People find everyone's got a chin in here, so.
Yeah. Anyways, so I think that's like the main difference. So I don't know how shocking it was to me. Disheartening, yes. Disappointing, yes. Disgusting, yes. I could keep going with synonyms, but the meaning's the same. But it's not really shocking. I think what needs to happen is, number one, consent talks from your child, obviously age appropriate consent talks, but also just the everyone joining, feminist societies at their universities would be a really good way. Fixing it, not advertising at all. But
No, I agree.
there might be one at Queen's.
There might be, and there might be a certain president of Camstock speaking right now.
With ginger hair.
Thank you. I'd like to hear for some more female members about this topic as well. If anyone has any additional points they'd like to make, you can. I'm just saying. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Megan Kate. Number one, I'm not surprised, to be fair, because it's the French. Number two.
For anyone new, we really hate the French for some reason. I genuinely don't know why.
It's James. That's purely.
I'm responsible for all ideological trends.
Yes, continue on. Continue on.
As someone who I do wrestling, sports illustrated team in WWE wrestling, I do intergender wrestling, and may I just say, equal rights, equal lefts, lads. If you are going to be sexist, we might bop you in the face.
Thank you. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please. I will come to you in a second.
I actually saw the same study that you're talking about, and of course the results are shocking and everything like that. But I did see that there was like on the sort of the outliers and things that might be affecting the results of it. One of it was Luke McGuire's Frank holiday.
That is on the line, Daniel.
You went to France this summer. You went to France this summer. I remember.
Right, last point on this. We've got to move on. Sorry. Yes.
Lots like my ideological forefather James, I do think France is a hive of scum and villainy.
Is that your entire point? Right, fair enough. So, yeah, before you did those, you can go again.
No, so what I will say, what's interesting about the study, I forgot to mention this, so they actually propose some kind of reasons why this might be. So a lot of people think that it's maybe something to do with social media, maybe that kind of thing. Also, pornography is another thing. Also, some people think it's maybe like a knee-jerk reaction to the Me Too movement as well. So, and that may be the reason why, with social media and things, why maybe younger generation are maybe more affected by kind of the sexist views that are maybe propagated by the likes of Andrew Tate and things. So yeah, I thought it was very interesting. Absolutely horrific, just very interesting as well.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you bringing that topic on because it was really important.
Sorry.
No pause at all. Thank you very much. Oh God, I just realised what's next. Put your hands down. Right, for new members, this is the worst 5 minutes of my week. This is whenever you can ask me.
If you feel like 5 minutes.
Doesn't for me, no. You can ask me any question you want in President's Questions, and you can put your hand up now. It's the usual suspects, as per usual. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Ellie Byrne. So recently I took a trip down south for something non-Lyterific related. Don't apply some. Well, I bought a plushie, because plushies are cute, and this one is like a female one that Room Tullies do, they don't do anymore. So it's like a deaf, like Grim Reaper, but with like these half octopus with like heart size. And it's so cute, it's demonic and cute, it's me, I love it. But anyway, on that point, if you could pick any plushie in the world, any, like Build-A-Bear, Pokemon Teddy, anything, right? You have to pick one plushie, what would it be and why?
That's a really good question. I mean, it would have to be my favourite animal of all, Dermot Hamill, of course. Calling back to your previous point. Yes, but it would actually be Charmander. I fucking love Charmander, so Charmander. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Jacqueline Bonner. Did you eat Weetabix this morning?
I did not.
Yeah.
I had Cheerios this morning, and you can back that up. I actually, for the first time, I actually have eaten breakfast this morning, so I think I actually do deserve a round of applause. So, I've just said, yes, okay, state your name for minutes, please.
How do you feel now that we all have confidence in your abilities to perform as president?
I mean, it's really nice to be supported, and it's really nice to have. Well, there's the other abstentionist vote. The coup's starting already.
Genuinely, my brain went weirdly because I went.
I
oh,
cannot wait to hear what you were thinking.
French once.
Yeah, that feels really good. I mean, like, I know, it's been a really, really good year for the society. We've got, as you can see tonight, the highest numbers we've had in 10 years. And we've had fantastic events, we've had really good social events. But the most important thing is, I couldn't still be here without the amazing council that I've had around me. I think they're absolutely fantastic, so I think they should get a round of applause as well. It's the first time I have confidence in myself, I'm one of the people, so I've got to have confidence, and people have confidence in me, so I've got confidence in myself. Thank you. Yes, I shouldn't have come to you. Yes, anyway.
Mr. President, on a lighter note of French, as I was asked last week, will you condemn the French?
I am not allowed to take political views, but
that's a moral political view.
But I will condemn the French publicly. Oh no, God. Yes.
As you and other members of the council know, I was dragged along yesterday to see the archives at Campbell College getting open, and I found the minutes of their debating society, and they were really illuminating debates, such as ones during World War II that I probably couldn't repeat.
No.
A debate among upper middle class Protestants about whether communism is a good thing. Some things never change. And whether France technically constitutes a superpower, it doesn't. But on the real moral question of our age, do you think radio is corrupting the youth?
I think the Scoop have a lot to answer for. I think they've really let themselves go. I think radio is really a massive threat to everything. So yes, I agree. Yes, last one.
Jack Hanlon, Mr. President, I was actually with Ellie while they were in Dublin, just building off that point there, and Bob the plushie. Do you think that it's fair that I should have been dragged to stand in Forbidden Planet for half an hour?
I mean, I'm not going to comment on personal matters, but I think you're absolutely right, as always. So, thank you very much. My torment for the week is over. Before we go to introduce our first speaker for tonight's debate, finally, we'll have the vote of prior opinion first. So, this is your personal view on the motion. So, if you think, and it is a spicy one tonight, if you think all drugs should be decriminalised, you can put your hand up now. This will be harder to count than usual.
All these people want to academy with 3-year-olds.
Shut up!
Oh wow. I've actually got my hands up.
It's just like the seminar film.
That's what I personally believe, okay?
You're talking to shit.
Give your hands up.
38. So if you're not a stoner, you can put your hand up now. If you think all drugs, wait. If you think no,
just if you oppose the motion.
If you oppose the motion, you can put your hand up now.
Here, I've never taken illegal drugs.
Still, these are all good.
This better be a long debate. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what number it's not yet. If you wish, quiet please, quiet please. If are you alright there, back there? You're still talking.
The motion, not funny enough that French.
If you wish to abstain from the motion, if you are an alliance voter, you can put your hand up now. Oh, Neil, come on. 14?
Come back to my picking
Decriminalise all drugs. Quiet, please. Quiet. Do we have the final numbers for the vote of prior opinion?
So far, there are 38 votes for the proposition, 9 votes for the opposition, and 11 abstentions for the proposition candidate.
So before we start with the first speaker for the proposition, we've got so many new members here. Don't know if you're going to come back after what we've just heard. But before we get in, we're going to explain the rules. So each speech is 7 minutes in length. your first and last minute of your speech is protected time. So I will ring this bell. We're there if you want to ring the bell. Okay. The first time I ring the bell means you can then ask questions to the speaker. So you can put your hand up and say, on that point or point of information, and you can make a point to the speaker. That's no longer than 15 seconds. When I ring the bell for the second time, it means you can no longer ask any questions, and it is protected time for them to give their own speech. So, if a speaker accepts your point, you can say it's only 15 seconds max. If they reject your point, you can't raise your hand again, or no one else can raise their hand again until they resume speaking on their speech. If you feel a speaker on the opposite side of the house has misunderstood or misrepresented your point, you can raise a point of clarification, which are very controversial here, given that most points of clarification are never ever points of clarification. So if you raise a point of clarification that's actually a point of information, I'll be very sad, and you should buy me a pint in the pub afterwards. And if you believe any rules have been broken, or if you need me to, if there's an emergency during the debate or anything like that, you can make a point of order. But these are reserved only for serious matters, and they should be done after the person has finished giving their speech. And now, with the rules duly outlined, it is my pleasure to welcome the first speaker for the proposition, Noah Barnett.
There are so many people here. Mr. President, members of the proposition, members of the opposition, and members of the House, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm excited to talk about this issue. As it's a fairly nuanced one that isn't really discussed enough at a policy creation level. But that's because they all do the coke and they don't want us to have any. Decriminalisation of drugs is defined as the substance remaining federally illegal if you're a federal state. Civil penalties replace criminal convictions, though law enforcement won't prioritise decriminalised substances. In essence, drug decriminalisation means a reduction in legal penalties for possession. The focus of drug decriminalisation is on drug users rather than suppliers. Decriminalising falls in the area between legalisation and prohibition. Firstly, I want to talk a little bit about the war on drugs and how much of a failure it was. President Richard Nixon declared drugs to be public enemy number one in 1971, along with people of colour and communism. His administration created the Drug Enforcement Agency. Ronald Reagan had more of a substantive contribution to the war on drugs. In his first administration, he signed the Comprehensive Control Act of 1984. I find the year of that being passed a wee bit ironic, given the sentences that were given to those people who just wanted to smoke a little bit of weed. The Act expanded penalties, and it created the federal mandatory minimum sentencing system and created procedures for civil asset forfeiture. Reagan was a strong proponent of criminalising drug users, especially African American ones. Much of the concentration of the war on drugs was targeted towards the black community, targeting the use and distribution of crack cocaine. This is especially egregious given the fact that crystal meth was as much of a problem for white Americans as crack was for black Americans. The administration created national youth anti-drug media drives, often painting drug users as belligerent degenerates. Their words, not mine. The turn of the century saw the war being called out for what it really was, a form of structural racism. The incarceration rate in the US was disproportionately African American men, and according to an article by the ACLU, the number of black men imprisoned as of 2001 was 792.
On that point,
no.
you said?
No.
I'll come to it later. It was 792,000. That equals the amount of men that were held as slaves in 1820.
On that point, would you say it's a racism problem or a drug problem?
I would say it's a racism problem.
So it's not to do with
Can I go back to
Yeah, no.
Thankfully, states in America and other nations around the world are approaching and beginning to embrace a more progressive attitude towards drug liberalisation. In 2020, the US House of Representatives passed the MORE Act, which decriminalised marijuana and expunged past convictions, arrests, and taxed cannabis to reinvest in communities which were targeted by the war on drugs. In December 2020, Oregon became the first state in the United States to decriminalise all of them. Let me talk to you a little bit about Portugal. The drug strategy was put in place in 2000. I know, James, I know, you hate people. It came into effect in 2001 and was intended to treat drugs without the stigma wrapped around addiction, because let's be frank, everybody, much like sex work and abortion, drugs are going to be used if people want them. There's no stopping that, and so people should have provisions made so that they can get the help that they need and the help that they deserve. Portugal decriminalised personal possession of drugs, and now they treat it as an administrative offence, meaning that it's no longer punishable by imprisonment and it doesn't result in a criminal record, and the associated stigma that's attached to it.
On that point?
No. They can still be met with fines or community service. The Portuguese model allows for drugs to be treated as a health issue rather than a criminal justice one. I also think it's fair to say that if Tom, Dick or Harry want to smoke a fat one after dinner, it's none of your fucking business. The benefits of the Portuguese model have been crystal clear. In 2001, Portuguese drug deaths were very similar to the EU average. The rates fell in Portugal following reform, while they increased in Europe within the same time frame. From 2011, both Portugal and the EU were rising considerably until the 2015-2016 period. The gap between Portugal and the rest of the EU is still much wider than it was pre-reform. Portuguese death rates are 6 per million from people aged between 15 and 64, compared to the EU average of 23.7 per million. And consider this is almost incomparable to the 315 deaths per million of 15 to 64s in Scotland. The Scottish rates are over 50 times larger than that of Portugal. In 2001, over 40% of the sentenced Portuguese prison population were held for drug offences, which was well higher than the European average, and 70% of reported crime was associated with drugs. The European average has risen over the past 20 years from 14 to 18%, and the proportion of people sentenced for drug offences in Portuguese prisons has fallen to 15.7% as of 2019, which is now below the European average. Drug usage has fallen as well. The first 5 years post-reform saw a small spike, but again that fell within the 5 years after that. Drug usage among 15 to 24-year-olds fell throughout the subsequent decade, and among the general population was lower in 2012 than it was in 2001. Fairly limited data shows that in over 25s these figures have risen a little bit, but before anybody can try and paint that as a failure of that system, that was only from one data set of a study made in 2016. Portugal has one of the lowest rates in Europe, and can we say that we're doing any better? No, not really.
On that point.
Yep.
Great. You get all this extra money. How can you guarantee they'll actually be spent on rehabilitation instead of more cops to crack down on the drug dealers?
I actually get to that later. They pull police going back on drug investigations, and they use that for funding addiction centres instead. Consumption figures don't paint the full picture when it comes to the level of harm experienced through drug use. A rise in drug use among individuals using only occasionally and recreationally are unlikely to lead in large rises in deaths or other harms. For this reason, in Portugal, in measuring high-risk drug use, measuring those who inject them is important. As of 2015, there were around 33,000 high-risk opioid users. This is a bit higher than the European average, yet still much lower than compared to the status pre-decriminalisation. Researchers have noticed a fall in the amount of individuals referred to drug dissuasion commissions, which are essentially like state interventions, which they were found to be dependent on drugs, which suggests that a general reduction in problematic drug use. In 2018, 90% of individual drug cases were found not to demonstrate problematic drug use. Another thing worth discussing is that I think drug usage falls down to a conversation about freedom. We don't have a right to tell anybody what to do with their own bodies, and I think the same should be discussed when it comes to drugs. Take weed, for instance. If someone wants to smoke it or have an edible, that should be down to whether or not they want to. They're not hurting anybody. And I think it's time we move past boomer 90s discourse about smoking weed one time and then you become Walter White.
Gateway.
Yeah, exactly. If someone wants to do drugs, I don't really care as long as they're not hurting anyone, and neither should you. It's evident that the harsh punishment style of dealing with drug usage isn't working. The models followed by places like Oregon, Portugal, and Uruguay.
On that point.
It's they're throwing. You throw me off, Cormac. The models followed by places like Oregon, Portugal, and Uruguay are genuinely helping people. Throwing someone in prison for 10 years because they've had one too many joints on them is so fucking stupid. I hope that you vote with proposition on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah, for your brilliant speech. It is my pleasure to welcome the first speaker for the opposition. Moving to oppose the motion to my Cormac Inspired.
Well, to start off, what I would like to say, your argument can't function unless you pick one side or another. Are drugs good or bad? But you did not actually do that in your speech. I would like to start off by talking about a Literific member's drug experimentation. I will keep the person's identity anonymous. But they might be sitting on the proposition tonight. They want time to be explained to myself and several others how, in their words, smoked 2 massive joints and felt nothing. They said that they are immune to, in their words, weed. The individual, by accident, is just like Bill Clinton. They smoked, but they did not inhale. He may also kind of be dressed strangely similar to me tonight. Which really, really threw me off. But on another occasion, this individual told us to experiment. I'm not going to say about this stuff. Doesn't matter. Why can he not tell us that? I'll tell you at the publication. course James wants to know. You know. Some might be wondering why I mentioned the story about immunity to weed and the pointless bravado associated with such phrases or whatever. There is in all discussions about drugs a cool and glorified portrayal from the suave, no-fear, hard-man Hunter S. Thompson image to the emaciated, heroin chic, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels cocaine user. It is all, of course, advertising a type of Marlboro cowboy that is designed and presented as cool, whilst ignoring that for every person who dances the fine line between being a drug user and a drug addict, there are countless more lives destroyed.
On that point.
No, thank you. The proposition tonight would like to paint a picture of harmlessness and harm reduction. They will, of course, ignore the dramatic consequences of drug normalisation and instead present the unimportant and misleading descriptions of casual drug use. My immediate concern with the venture the proposition are proposing is that decriminalising drugs essentially legitimises gangsterism and encourages it.
Point of information?
No, thank you. We have seen the effects of gangsterism across the world. The proposition insists drugs should be normalised even more and depends solely on stereotypes of the local stoner who sells a small amount of drugs occasionally. This is, of course, a microcosm view of drug dealing. The narco-terrorists and international crime syndicates who know they are ruining countless lives, generated and making profit through the misery and billions in profit each year, their crime organisations are big enough to be listed on the NASDAQ. We often hear about the Yes. Okay.
Well, you're talking about drug dealers then, which is still illegal when you decriminalise drugs.
Decriminalising but essentially opens up that more people will buy those drugs. That's just a fact.
Can't go back. No, can't
go back.
Go back and forth,
We often hear discussions here about how drug users shouldn't be punished and that it's a victimless crime. I asked them to look at the countries in Latin America and Southeast Asia where children are used by these drug gangs, where they break bones and kill if anyone goes against their will. And of course, the rampant misogyny, prostitution and everything else associated with these gangs. That bag at the weekend, the drug users, suddenly isn't so victimless and guilt-free.
On that point.
No thank you. This is however lost on the middle class, supposedly left-wing trendy types who wouldn't know principled politics to see. This insistence of guilt-freeness has always puzzled me. This country has seen such violence created by the drug trade and competitive nature of these vying gangs. The middle-class cocaine users, they don't live in the housing estate where the guns are fired at people, where petrol bombing attacks in places like Drogheda are normal, or in the Dublin underworld, a senior criminal is considered to be someone who's lived to their late 20s and not been killed yet. We will perhaps, and we already have, heard some discussion about the Portuguese model, or as it was formerly known as the British model. For those who don't know, that was the system Britain previously had in place till the late 1960s. There were very few drug dealers at the time. The very small percentage of the population who were heroin addicts could register with the GP and receive chemically pure and sound drugs. Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones was actually part of this world. He would actually buy smack, as he called it, from one of these registered users. This is a long time ago, and the fact that you could buy it off the people, didn't actually really do much to actually stop it, And essentially, legalising these, or even decriminalising, will just put more hands in the money of people who are profiting off of misery. Again, I would like to remind the audience that the portrayal we will hear from the proposition of drugs will be that happy-go-lucky, drugs are fun, and that lives are not devastated directly and indirectly by the sale of drugs. Finally, I would like to talk about race, class and police bias. This has been, perhaps it will be ignored or talked around, but maybe not spoken directly about by the proposition tonight. As Noah mentioned actually, and I hope everyone in the room is aware, black people in the US and the UK are disproportionately searched in contrast to white people. Suspicion of drugs is commonly used as a reason to do so. I say decriminalising drugs wouldn't stop this racism. Police were racist before then, as we've heard in society before about how the police originated from people who had to clutch slaves. And the police will be racist before drugs became popular in African American communities. I think it's just ingenuous to suggest that decriminalising it would lead to a lesson of racism. We should look to stop racism, not normalising substances and acts which have terrorised the black community. It is worth noting that on every occasion that black communities have organised and defended themselves, They have manifested in a way which was anti-drug. This can be seen with the Black Panthers, who took over and forced drug dealers, whether black or white, out of their communities and seized money to provide community services. It is no surprise that the Panthers came under attack by police and intelligence services. Eventually the CIA themselves would actually flood black communities with crack cocaine, devastating them. We've all seen the effects we heard about earlier. You know, you can't say that a tool that was used to oppress a community will also be used in its liberation. We even see it in how addiction is viewed. Many view the opioid crisis in the US as a medical one. First, most people's views of, say, someone addicted to crack or heroin, it's viewed as, sorry for saying it, but it's viewed as like scummy by a lot of people. This is no reflection on the morality of any of these drugs. I'm including opioids in that, but generally instead down to racist reasons. This racism surpasses just how the drugs are used, with crack cocaine dealers in the US generally being punished for the same length of time as pure powder cocaine, who had 100 times the weight of said drug. This was down to racism. Most countries have a racism problem. The worst way to enforce this and to further it would be to normalise this destroying communities. Thank you.
Speech. It is my pleasure to welcome the second speaker for the proposition, Megan here.
Good evening, President, and all members of the House. I'm back. It's Brittany, bitch. Today we are talking about something that quite a few of us are familiar with, and some of which hold near and dear to our hearts. You know who you are. Drugs. From caffeine to cocaine, alcohol to anabolic steroids, drugs are a thing whether you like it or not, and are used widely in our society, legally or illegally. I think it would benefit our society if we decriminalised the usage of drugs and operated on the policy of, if you aren't hurting anyone, go for it. This means distribution would still be criminalised, and also violent crimes due to the use of drugs is also illegal because that's a separate crime. Now, we need to first discuss the tough stuff. The criminalisation of drugs disproportionately affects marginalised groups such as racial minorities, the working class, racial minorities, the working class, the homeless, and your local smicks. But not necessarily because they are more likely to take them, but because they're more likely to get caught. It's no secret that the government, and by extension the police, search minorities more than non-minorities. In England and Wales between April 2020 and March 2021, there were 697,405 stop and searches, excluding vehicle searches. There were 7.5 stop and searches for every 1,000 white people, compared with 52.6 for every 1,000 black people. So that's 0.75% of white people compared to 5.26% of black people.
On that point?
Yes.
How much of that is due to the specific problem with stop and search around going after the violent weapons problem in London and the disproportionate police of black communities? Like, even if you decriminalise drugs, we'd still be going after the same communities for different crimes and policing those communities.
Yes, but if we stop this issue of going after them for possession of drugs to use, that's at least reducing it by some sort of margin. Now let's see, where was I? Yep. So that's 0.75% of white people compared to 5.26% of black people. If you make that 100 people, not even one whole white person got searched, just 3/4. This is only the statistic for white and black people. Factors such as age, class, and literally what you're wearing also factor in. This is only the statistics for England and Wales, not taking into consideration the even worse cases in other countries such as the good old US of A, One of the reasons why so many people in the US are jailed for drug use is because the US police literally have a quota to fill for the amount of people in privatized prisons due to, in case you didn't know, private businesses get prisoners to make their shit. It's true. So they have a quota to fill for the amount of people in privatized prisons, and if that falls, then they get fined. So it's in their best interest to throw as many people in jail for using drugs as possible and other crimes. In case you don't in case you don't realize, they don't care about addicts or recreational users or some kid who smoked a joint once at a party and got busted for it. They don't care about you. The government, does not care about you. Not their government, not England, Scotland, Ireland, Europe, Asia, Africa, fucking Antarctica, and before you tell me that they don't have a government, the shadow government owns it. So, the government is not doing this because they care about you. They did it because they did what was popular at the time to keep control. Next, let's talk about money. 1.4 billion is spent annually enforcing drug laws in England alone. Think about what we could do with the money that we would save if we stopped policing usage. Like Portugal, we could use the money to invest in health and social programs, including drug development treatment and harm reduction services. Instead, we could focus on enforcing the people who are actually doing something wrong. Dealers, distributors, and most locally, paramilitary groups. Yeah.
If there's no dealers, how do the people get the drugs?
But what? That's what I'm saying. If we stop putting so much
legislation.
Shut up. Shut up. I'm not saying that there are no dealers. I'm saying we should start policing dealers more than the people who are vulnerable and using drugs.
Indeed.
But we should be doing it more because we'd have more time to focus on that if we're not, arresting people for smoking a joint. So yeah, speaking on people who use drugs, guess who also uses drugs? The government! That's a separate point. The government and rich people and the social elite and I'm not telling you if I do or not. I think I can safely speak for a good portion of us when I say we no likey the government. And I think I can also speak for quite a few libertarians when I say we no likey the government telling us what to do. And I also think I can speak for many people when I say we no likey the government telling us what to do with our own bodies. I personally am a huge believer in freedom of choice when it comes to bodily autonomy in all senses, and I mean all senses, unless there's something really weird that I'm forgetting about. So, I stand firmly with the proposition when I say this House would decriminalise the use of all drugs. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure to welcome the second speaker for
Panthers.
the prompt competition at the debate. Top Ireland.
Mr. President, members of the proposition, members of the House, this debate feels very fitting for society in a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, we actually aren't that dissimilar to a lot of South American states that are infamous for drug production, and bear with me on this. We love a party, but Lavish doesn't really compare to the Copacabana beach. We have a very, very long history of paramilitary-style connections with former President Eamon McCann's really questionable IRA lit talk, and his protege Dermot Hamill simply just coming from South Armagh. And of course, our leadership is almost constantly faced with the threat of a coup. This debate is one which is happening more and more often at dinner tables, in boardrooms, parliaments, congresses, senates, and assembly chambers around the world, and now in the Senate room. Decriminalisation of all drugs, however, is not the way to go. The opioid epidemic in the US and the abuse of already legal drugs shows that this is not the solution for already incredibly strained systems. Before I begin, though, I will admit the system that we have is broken. The last 50 years of drug policy in many ways has failed. The war on drugs has been lost. The drugs won. Nixon's ideal of total eradication was and remains unobtainable, with an estimated $1 trillion annual bill hiked up on this road to absolutely nowhere. It is clear that the status quo hasn't worked. But the criminalisation of drugs and the vilification of drugs in the most literal meaning of the word, with a highly militarised response, they're not the same thing. War is not the only option when it comes to criminalisation. We have no war on jaywalking. There's not a war on parking on a double yellow line. The typical American way of an iron fist and an iron glove was a disaster waiting to happen. In the UK, our primary drug-related legislation is over 50 years old. Opinions and attitudes on possession, use and sentencing have changed drastically in that time. What we need is a review and a renewal of drug legislation to ensure that the safety of citizens and communities is paramount. The widespread decriminalisation of all drugs will not do this, but modern, fit-for-purpose legislation can. Now, obviously, it is important to note that not all drugs are illegal, as has been said already. If they were, my usual two-step hangover cure of 2 paracetamol and a cry would now be 1 step long and a little bit tragic. But even so, the non-criminal drug market is lucrative, expansive, and already hugely difficult to regulate. The privatised American system, for example, where insulin costs almost $100 compared to $7.50 in the UK, shows that when in the hands of companies and corporations, the system is simply not fit for purpose. There's perhaps no greater example of this than the opioid epidemic in the States, which has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of Americans and decimated communities across the country. Entirely legal drugs like OxyContin, Percocet and fentanyl, available on prescription, are potent, addictive and widely available. The risks have been well known for years, but they were pushed by both drug companies and the US government for fast relief from chronic pain. This has led to the crisis that we see today. It has been admitted by governments since. In the 20 years from 1991, opioid prescriptions tripled in the US to over 219 million per year. It's at a point now where there's an opioid prescription for every American in the country and then some. These potentially lethal pills are often the only option for someone on low income that has to rely on their insurance. They simply won't pay for other therapies. Purdue Pharma, the corporation owned by the Sackler family, which created and sold these drugs, have shown no remorse for the pain and suffering that they have caused.
On that point,
yes,
you're completely ignoring the fact that the drugs that have actually been seen to help people with chronic pain like me and mental health efforts have been delayed for years because drugs are not decriminalised and they're still illegal, which is why things that could actually help a lot of people like me stay off drugs like opium, they're not allowed on the market because of decriminalisation and stigmatisation.
I do talk at a point later on about some of the drugs that do have medicinal properties. However, the decriminalisation of all drugs, which is what the motion states, that's not going to solve the problem. There are too many drugs on the market that do not have medicinal properties that can be harmful. The Sackler family are still lauded and celebrated by many, with their name attached to museums and galleries and venues across the United States and the world. Now, it's not just an American problem. Other countries like Myanmar, Canada and the UK, with different health systems, face similar issues with opioids. So if health systems cannot adequately regulate the drugs, which are already non-criminal, how can we expect them to ensure safety and security from decriminalisation of all drugs and the back channels, racketeering, black market trading and everything else that comes with it? And while I admit there are drugs which are currently legal which do have medicinal properties, the vast majority do not. The decriminalisation of all drugs, as the motion does state, removes the criminality of harmful drugs which can and are fatal. Now, I remember in secondary school sitting in a number of assemblies in which a disinterested teacher would stand at the front of the hall in a poor-fitting suit with an even poorly made PowerPoint, looking close to what we saw here last week, discussing the dangers of what they called legal. So if anybody wasn't lucky enough to have sat through a similar presentation whenever they were 14, you're in luck because you're about to get it now. Legal highs were effectively illegal drugs without the illegality. It capitalised on a loophole in the law which allowed people to create a substance containing entirely legal chemicals, which created an effect similar to that of being on drugs, which is yet another fading of our old and out-of-date legislation. Now, these were being sold and marketed mainly to children and young teenagers, leading to addiction, illness, and in some extreme and heartbreaking cases, death. Now, the real danger of these legal highs was that you could never know what was contained within them. Due to the relative difficulty in obtaining illegal substances, it was usually a concoction of legal chemicals. There were some occasions in which illegal drugs were used. But if we were to decriminalise all drugs and make them more widely and easily available, imagine the consequences there could be. This is yet again another failure to efficiently regulate a field full of risks. We cannot afford to worsen the problem by adding more potential dangers on top of the ones which we already have. Now, I understand why you may vote to wish for the proposition tonight, the weekly chaos of the society, whether it involves the President's breakfast or the lack thereof, or Luke McGuire's shoes or the lack thereof, or the 2-year seal of last year's events or the lack thereof. Nearly anyone will be tempted to try hard drugs. But decriminalisation causes more problems than it solves. What is needed is reform of the processes that we have now, learn from the mistakes of the past and the mistakes of the present to create a safe and practical system that works for everybody. I urge you friends to vote with the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, for your speech. It is now my pleasure to welcome the third speaker for the proposition, Jack Allen. Get Jack for a round.
Almost characteristic of the stereotypes associated with the people on our side, I'm very ill prepared because I was doing something else. I just want to say on record, as a very studious member of the Queen's University Belfast community, I have never done drugs in my life. Not even once. Never wouldn't think of it. But let's suppose hypothetically I have. It's been
Your friend.
quite my friends, let's say, yes, have done quite a lot of varying levels from solvents to psychedelics. And I would just like to say that there is definitely a narrative that drugs are these amazing things that have so many different properties to them, and I would say that that is true to an extent. That's a narrative that would be pushed maybe by our side, but at the same time, that's not also the reality. The reality is that these drugs do tear apart families. Addiction destroys and ravages communities. I've seen it firsthand. I am from Downpatrick. I just heard a laugh. I know. Being from Downpatrick, it's something that you see very prevalent, that the community is torn apart. Very recently we had a fella who stole a car and drove it up the main street of the town and smashed it into a local business, breaking both of his legs at the time. The problem with that there was that supposedly he had smoked what he thought was marijuana, and it turned out to be spice, a synthetic cannabinoid of which we do not know the contents of. This is why I'm advocating for decriminalising drugs, because whenever we decriminalise drugs, we can take away the stigma that pharmaceutical companies and government agencies have put on them so that they can be researched better. Yes?
On the point of stigmatisation, alcoholism, alcohol addictions and alcohol use is stigmatised, smoking is stigmatised, both of these are legal.
Yep.
So why would there be a difference if you legalise drugs?
Because there's things in place to help you get off smoking and alcohol, including, like if you go into any Asda in any shop in Ireland, you can find Nicorette, you cannot find methadone, you cannot find a... Well, let's move on to psychedelics very quickly as well. In terms of small-scale research studies, we found that a large majority of addicts, including those who are alcoholics and such, have found benefit from psychoactive substances in terms of getting off of these things. This research cannot continue if these drugs remain illegal. Also, on the point made earlier about the perpetuation of drug dealers within these communities, we are not allowing drug dealers to reign free. Decriminalisation, working mostly on a state-by-state basis, operates on personal possession. If you look at, say, Amsterdam, if you go to Amsterdam, you can have a small amount. Drugs are actually illegal in Amsterdam, but they have certain aspects of possession have been decriminalised. You can keep a small amount of drugs on it, enough for yourself. You cannot keep enough to be running a cartel organisations. These drug runners are not going to be able to run scot-free if these drugs are allowed to be legalised. Can anyone here tell me what the greatest crime in Holland is at the minute in terms of it's tax evasion? It's not drug dealing, it's not violent crime. And a lot of people would like to do the funny characterization of, oh, they're all just smoking weed. If we legalise this stuff, less than 30% of the population of the Netherlands uses marijuana in any way, shape or form. It did not increase from whenever before it was legalised. Obviously it makes it a lot easier to get these things, but if this is a personal choice, much as Noah has said repeatedly throughout his speech, only those who have availed of that personal choice before it becomes legal will continue to do so. You will not get...
Point?
Yes, go on ahead.
In Portugal that wasn't the case. Use of methamphetamine, use of opioids and use of cocaine all went up after they were decriminalised. And look, you've got to decide, are they good or are they bad? If they're bad, fine. You've got to argue for that. If they're good, you can't have both. Your argument doesn't make sense. None of your arguments make sense unless you pick one.
I feel like it does make sense. I feel like taking these things into the black and white really doesn't help anybody. If we use, say, for the example, cars, many people will drive their car high speed down the road and smash into someone, or take it out rallying and drive without a driver's license. Does this mean that we should ban all cars because there's irresponsible car users? I really don't feel so. The black and white stigmatization of drug use, once again, if we label all drug use bad, we deal with the issue that all those who use drugs are bad. This is simply not the case. What if somebody makes a mistake? We can find these people from impoverished communities finding drugs as their main way out because there's not a lot of option afforded to them. Say this is criminalised. A 16-year-old drug user is found with cannabis on them and they receive a charge. That follows them for the rest of their life. The stigma in their community as a drug user follows them for the rest of their life. That affects their employment. If they receive a criminal record, that affects their relationships with their families. They can never move to America. They can't find new prospects. What we're perpetuating is a system of ideological violence in which these people are kept at the level that they are forever for something so insignificant as smoking a fat J. People close to me have dealt with addiction, and I have dealt with the loss of friends as a result of addiction. And much as Tom said, that has been to alcohol. Alcoholism has torn through my family to some degrees, and I've lost friends. It's a horrible thing to see someone get torn away from you like that. And it's knowing that there could have been, from research into ketamine specifically, that these things are treatable, and there is a genuine way out, especially with psilocybin as well. This has also been proven to help people who deal with alcoholism. There could have been a way out for them, but this may have been taken away because of the stigma in this country around drugs. By allowing your personal biases towards drugs to infiltrate the lives of those around you and your fellow countrymen, your fellow citizen, you are devoiding them of chances and abilities to make independent decisions that could possibly be for the betterment of their lives. Even if it is something as simple as allowing someone to smoke a joint, or finding someone who's dealing with severe mental health issues in a controlled environment of care with psychoactive substances to deal with, say, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, all disorders that have been scientifically proven by the outskirts of the scientific community through peer-reviewed studies to improve with this. You should be ashamed of yourself if you would feel the need to devoid these people of this. And also, just on the point of the pharmaceutical companies, I will say quickly that by allowing pharmaceutical companies to hold a threshold of what drugs are legal and what are not, they're holding a bottleneck on the market. They are more vicious in their taking than the drug dealers that are rampant within our communities. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jack, for your rising speech. It is my great pleasure to welcome the rat whisperer himself,
Mr. President, members of the House, Madam Secretary, members of the Council, it is a pleasure as always to address you all today. All drugs. All drugs. It is not just the guy that's kind of smelled in your history class that did a lot of weed and no one really liked him, and you used to kind of spray deodorant whenever he walked past. But it's not just him we're talking about. It's not just someone that takes a bit of ecstasy at longitude. It's not just someone that was really into LSD. All drugs. What we're talking about is decimating communities. What we're talking about is normalizing drugs that destroy families, tear apart our nation, hold up the American economy apparently. What we're talking about... No thanks. What we're talking about is destroying our communities destroying the communities of the future, destroying your children's lives, destroying anyone that may come after you. That is what the proposition offer, my friends, and no thanks. I reject it. I reject their offer and I rebuke it. And before they tell you about how, oh, it's only you. If you decide to take drugs, it's only you that's responsible for yourself. It's only you that faces the consequences. How about the fact that, according to, I believe it's a mental health organisation, but I believe this study is from Stanford, but it could be Harvard, I'm not sure. There's a significant link between schizophrenia and psychosis related to drug use, specifically frequent cannabis use. So let's smoke a fat joint and then we can all hear voices. Point. No, thanks. Similarly, there is a link between violent crime, between burglary, between theft, and between higher addiction rates. So, it's not just you paying for it, it's your health service paying for it. It's your police paying for it whenever they have to deal with the guy that is off his fucking head and he stabbed someone.
All that information?
No, thanks. You're paying for it. It's not just the drug user, it's you. It's risk-taking behaviour. It's the fact that, similarly, it's like if you drive a car, but the difference is you can't see properly and you're behind the wheel. So, if we're going to talk about driving cars, imagine we drove through a crowd and then it's you paying for it. That's what drugs do to your community. They flood in. Drug dealers don't disappear if you decriminalise. Sure.
Do you want to drive a car?
I can't speak to that. I don't do drugs. Really? Because I care about my community, Jack. But clearly,
No, that's not
can I accept it?
If you really want.
Of course, Mr.
Community you care about being psychoanalyzed.
Damn fucking right. But I feel like on Mr. Burns' point, I must point out that I have never been a member of the provisional IRA. Unlike my predecessor Raymond McCann, possibly. Or at least his guests. But there's also an interesting point from Megan, which I feel like has to be brought up, the idea that, well, if we're still going to have searches in London. People are still getting searched. We still have knives. That's a big reason why people are getting searched. Taking away drugs means we're going to search more people for knives rather than for having coke on them.
You can if you want.
You can peel. You want to peel on me, yeah.
Yeah, so point of information.
Yes.
We should be looking at that though.
We should. What? Well, yes, of course we shouldn't be searching people rapidly for knives, but if the police force are endemically racist, they're going to do it. Like, let's not rely on the Metropolitan Police to be great. It's not just about weed, it's not just about social responsibility, it's about the paramilitaries will still hold your communities hostage. They'll still do it whether they're decriminalised or not, just because whenever you walk away with the bag in your hand, you're not the one that's going to get arrested. But they're still going to be in your communities. They're still going to extort people. They're still going to have a hold all over the place. They're still going to kneecap people if they're not paying protection money, sure.
On both sides of the house you still have these drug lords. However, on that side of the house you have more people getting treatment, which means that there's less demand. They affect the drug lords, they get less money, bada bing bada boom, great crack. You have more advantages on that side.
If people are in prison, do we not provide them addiction support?
No.
I've seen one black guys.
I've heard you. But what we have to understand is we're not simply saying, oh, stick with the same model. As Tom pointed out, we would like to see greater legislation introduced, greater supports. That doesn't mean decriminalising. What that means is putting in place supports within prisons for those that have already been arrested for drug crimes.
On that point of information?
Jesus Christ.
Please. No.
No. And also, too many people. Tax evasion? I mean, Jack's gone, but how many people die from tax evasion? I've never walked up the Malone Road and gone, fuck,
Look, everyone's committing tax evasion. I know it's leafy and all, but no one's staggering into me going, "Here, have you any coins that I can write off?" No one's ever done that. I mean, I can't speak to everyone's experience in Methody, but I'm gonna get in trouble for that. Tomorrow. So, I'm gonna get in so much trouble for that joke. My friends, it's very important that we don't just get drawn into the emotion of this debate. That what we do is... I do. That what we must accept is that this is not just a debate about addiction centres. This is also a debate about what they offer you, and what they offer you is nothing. They offer you paramilitarism. They offer you drugs. They offer the destruction of your communities. It's so fucking off button. They offer you nothing.
If I yelled at, I'd just go home, alright?
I'm prettier when I do it.
No, it's well, it's protecting time.
So, my friends, reject the proposition, reject them, protect your communities, think of your families, think of your future children, think of Matthew's glasses, oppose.
Thank you very much, it is my great pleasure to welcome the final speaker for the proposition closing for tonight's debate, Ellie Byrne.
Good evening, members of the House. This is obviously as a convener. I'm trying not to speak as much this year. However, this is the one debate that I said I have to speak on because this is a debate that I have a very personal investment in. I mean, in the past 3 months, I have lost 4 friends to drug addiction and overdose. Everyone on council knows, you know, the deep family history I have with addiction, and you know, the fact that the opposition didn't even know that when you are in prison, the only support you get if you're there because of an addiction is locked in your cell for 24 hours with your lunch served to you and sniffed by dogs when you come back from the med bay and treated like trash. That is what our prison system's help for drug addiction is. Last year we lost 398 people to ODs. 398 people who did not need to die because of this issue. In Portugal, which is 6 times our population, they lost 6 people in total last year to overdose. 6! No, thank you, Karen, I'm not taking points of information. 6 times our population. And also, this side here, Cormac started off by saying you need to say if drugs are good or bad. No, we do not. Because drugs are a wide variety of things. Treating people with addiction like a health issue it is, like a mental health issue it is not about whether what they are doing is good or bad. If someone is schizophrenic or in a manic episode, if they are hurting themselves, if they are a danger to themselves or other, do we throw them in prison because what they're doing is morally bad and not take into account their mental illness? No! They get mental treatment. Although it be a shit over here, they do get mental health support. They get put on medication that helps for them. They get counselling that helps for them. They go into rehabilitation that helps for them. Whenever the drugs are illegal over here, you cannot go into a rehabilitation centre in a lot of times. And this is the main reasons why we are on drug decriminalisation. And I'd like to point out 2 more things before I get into that. First off, I personally have lived in the environment of being very close to drug addiction. I learned how to administer Narcan at 7 years old. So believe me when I say I'm informed on this topic. I have worked in that industry as a community support worker. I have worked on the streets with people who do have addictions and who are homeless, and I have been homeless myself. So when I say I'm educated on this topic, I mean I am educated on this topic. And anyone who's educated or has worked in that industry or lived in that area will tell you the only solution we have for Northern Ireland right now at this desperate turning point, because it is only going to get worse from here, is decriminalisation. And this is why. 1, When drugs are decriminalised, you can have safe use houses. We do not have safe use houses. Whenever you see homeless people on the street, and you might hear a lot of bitching, especially if you work in hospitality like myself in city centre, of, oh, why don't they go to the halfway house? Why don't they go to the hostel? First off, you have to pay 25 in cash to get into a hostel, even if you're homeless, which is sickening. Second off, you have to do a drug test as you enter. If you're positive for drugs, you're turned away. When you have a mental health and addiction, an addiction that has led you to the street in the first place, that you cannot cope with the pain and trauma which anyone who has an addiction to the point that they've ended up in the street, I will tell you, if you can sit and have a 30-minute conversation with them like they are the human they are, you will find out the absolutely abhorrent stuff they have went through in their life that has led to that addiction. And you want to kick them while they're down? They can't, they have to be sober. And you cannot. I dare you to go sit on a street in Belfast for 6 hours because you'll most likely be screamed at. You'll be pissed on by Smiths because that's a common thing that happens in city centre when you're homeless, by the way. Women, see if you are homeless, you have a 6-time rate, more than normal, of being raped. That is the situation we are at. If you decriminalise drugs, however, we can then have safe use houses, which means that in city centres, those hostels that are there for those people can take them in whether they're positive on drugs or not. And it means that they can safely use on that site. Now what that also means is that there's needle banks available. There is clean needles to stop the spread of disease and illness. And there are also testing sites. So that means they can test the drugs. Because when you work in that sector, you also know that 0.5 micrograms of fentanyl can kill, and fentanyl is being laced into things like cocaine, crack cocaine, to hash. It is being laced in everything that is fuck all to do with fentanyl being in it, but it is being in it, and 0.5 micrograms can kill. So when you buy something that you think that is harmless as spice, and it has that in it, if it is over 0.5, you're automatically dead. It is a death sentence. By having safe use houses, it means that we have testing centres, so our health force know what is being used and know what is being laced, so the stuff that is on the market is less likely to be dodgier. And if you're in that place of vulnerability where you have to take drugs, you're taking drugs that are safer so you can be on the mend. The second part is, after needle safe houses, prison reform. Whenever someone is caught with a possession over here, you will be arrested for a possession amount. This side here said, what about the gang dealers? What about the drug dealers? That's not what we've mentioned once. Because it's not about them. When you decriminalise drugs, it does not mean that, oh, drugs are decriminalised, I can have like a full, 20 kilograms of coke in my pocket and be fine. No, that is not what it is. There will be legal carry amounts. Personal use amounts will be decided by sector, like the one I used to work in, based on how much of that drug was usually taken. Now, in the past in America, this has been brutalised, so where you could have more coke than you could weed, or more than crack cocaine, because they wanted to prosecute racially. But we've talked about that already. But what this means is that whatever, like say 5 joints worth, you can carry, but if you're carrying a whole, you can't. So it will not target the people who are victims in this situation. It will target the upper people. And what also happens is whenever you test drugs, a funny thing is, all drugs and where they're manufactured has a fingerprint to it. So whenever we now have a much more open testing facilities, it means we can figure out where these drugs are coming from, which makes it easier to prosecute, easier to take down dealers, easier to stop the crime that this side won't shop about. So actually, what are they doing that's helping? Because since the UK has criminalised drugs, the death rate of people using drugs actually between the 20 years after they prohibited it in the UK, because I googled it after he said it, was 137% increase in drug users once it was illegal, not when it was sober, or not sober, sorry, legal, sorry, talking about this topic. So, and I've got so much to go through, and I have very little support, or time, sorry. My brain is just, So, Portuguese, drugs or not? Yes. Drugs are good or bad. I think I've covered that this issue is not about whether drugs are good, drugs are bad. Most people I'm looking at right now have had drugs, but because a lot of you are not obviously not everyone in the room, but because you weren't in a working class estate or colour or targeted by the police at the exact time you had that in your pocket, you're sitting in front of me today. However, people in the community I grew up in the working class estate I grew up in the streets that I lived on, are being persecuted for it every day. It needs to stop, and we can make it stop by decriminalising drugs and helping the most vulnerable in our society, because it could be you. It could be one traumatic event could lead you down that path, and it'll be you. And you want people to spit on you in the street and turn you away. You go to prison, you come out of prison, you get stuck in a hostel where most people are also using, you're back on the street doing drugs again, you can't get a job because you're doing drugs, you can't get a bank because you don't have a house address, you can't get a house because you don't have a bank. And it is a perpetual cycle and circle of struggle and isolation, and it needs to stop. It is not acceptable in our country. Thank you.
Good luck, Ryan. So, final speaker proposal for tonight's debate, Ryan Boyd, give Ryan a big round of applause. Thank you.
I think I'm going to take the pace down a bit with my speech, and there's been a variety of speeches here tonight. We've started off with some like memery on the first few speeches, and then it's obviously gotten very serious. So I'm going to try and obviously Ellie's personal experiences. It's very moving and all the rest of it. I'm going to start off with a bit of a disclaimer, which is that any references to personal drug use during my speech are for the purposes of argumentation and aren't actually real. So firstly, just to provide a few points of rebuttal to Ellie's arguments, whilst not in any way disrespecting their experiences. I think you can provide rehabilitation in prisons within a framework of not decriminalising drugs. We might not be doing it now, but you can. And we actually, in terms of, Ellie talks a lot about sort of, sort of things like needle exchanges and things like that. And we had one on the just off Botanic near where I live, and it wasn't closed down because of the current framework with the law or anything. It was closed down because of NIMBYism, basically. The local residents kicked up a fuss, and the council shut down the service.
For information?
No, I don't think I will take. No, I'm not going to take points of information. Just to sort of, we've got quite a lot to go through, but I think we do need to address I think we do need to come back to the point about how the proposition started off with the point about doesn't simply just having a smoke of weed doesn't harm other people, and I think we do need to come back to the point about how we need to recognise the harms of habitually taking drugs. So just to give you my personal experience, which isn't actually real for the recording, in first year I used to smoke weed regularly. My grades then suffered and I averaged just a 2.2 in first year, and I think we all know the sorts of people who who become stoners and their education and careers suffer from it. And it was only 2 years ago that I developed a quite bad coke habit, and it became a dependency. And within the space of a few weeks, I'd spent about £400 on cocaine. And it's only due to the interventions of former members of this society that it did not develop into a full-blown addiction. Now, the proposition are here tonight to argue in favour specifically of decriminalisation, of stopping punishing individual drug users and focusing resources on those who sell illegal drugs, not those who take them. And while we've heard some very good speeches from the proposition, I think you do need to think about what they're actually proposing, because decriminalisation only solves half of the problem. It keeps the supply of drugs in the hands of criminal gangs, and in the case of Northern Ireland, paramilitary groups. And it carries on the devastating impact of the war on drugs on the third world, rather than creating a legal, well-regulated domestic market here in the UK. And it perpetuates the Russian roulette that is intrinsic in the nature of the unregulated illegal drug supply. So you can buy something 1 week and then buy it again the next, even from the same drug dealer. and the concentration could be completely different, almost as if it's a different drug altogether. You don't know, no thank you, what the suppliers have mixed in with what you're taking. Now, I think the opposition case in the debate tonight really comes down to that there are two credible policies you can have towards drugs. You can come down hard on demand and create a sort of deterrent to try and prevent people from taking drugs in the first place, or you can accept people will always take drugs and focus on harm reduction. But, and here's the critical point, and this is why I disagree with the motion, is that I think you do that through legalisation and by improving the quality and safety of the product through a well-regulated market. Whereas when you just decriminalise drugs, you're still keeping you're still going after the drug dealers. You're still, not having a well-regulated market in which the drugs are being produced. So you still have So you still have all the problems. The biggest problem, I think, in regarding how we deal with drugs in this country. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that decriminalisation is kind of like the alliance party of drug policies. It's like a middle of the road solution that achieves not as much as you could achieve if you were minded towards a more liberal approach to drugs. So I think that's really what we need to focus on in this debate, not whether drugs are bad or whether drugs are good, even though I've kind of contradicted my own self by saying that. But you do need to I think you need to focus on what is it that the proposition is actually presenting to you tonight. And I don't think it's a convincing case. I think Ellie's argument would be absolutely spot on if the proposition was this House would legalise all drugs, which was actually a debate that we did 2 years ago and I argued on the other side. And I've actually pretty much used some of the same stuff from that speech from 2 years ago. But yeah, I think the reason you should vote for the opposition is I think the proposition has brought in a lot of unrelated issues that are endemic in wider society and tried to pin that all on drugs. So you had the stuff about, stop and search and private prisons, all that stuff that's a bit unrelated to it. And, if you actually do want to do some of the stuff that the proposition say that they want to do about sort of saving money and reallocating resources, then then you really want to support legalising drugs, but that's not the motion that we're debating. So yeah, that's pretty much the case, I think, and it's been a fun debate. But yeah, this is a poorly thought through motion. And really, when it comes to drug policy, I think you have two options. You either go down the hardline route of trying to suppress demand through criminalisation, or you legalise, and decriminalisation doesn't solve the problem.
That was something. It's fun.
I just laugh at awkward things. I'm very sorry.
So thank you all very much for your fantastic speeches this evening. I would like to pay particular thanks to Jack, Ellie and Ryan, who have given very moving speeches about their personal experiences. So I think they deserve another round of applause. Before we get to the vote, we have time for questions from the House, so we can do, if there's any questions, I've forgotten which side is which. Any questions for the proposition, you can put your hand up now. State your name for the minutes, please.
Daniel McCormick. Seemed to me that you guys, as much as you made a compelling argument, you were arguing against when you were framing what this lot were arguing for. You were framing it as though they were arguing for the status quo, and exclusively the status quo, which wasn't what they were arguing for, at least that's not what they said. Either address the reform and why what you're proposing is better than what they claim they're proposing, or I don't know, would address why they're addressing the status quo.
Yeah. So first off, the first three speakers did not mention legalisation. It wasn't until Ryan, which obviously we all spoken by that point, to address it. Second of all, the reason why after working in the industry I'm not for legalisation of all drugs is because that decriminalisation is focused on harm reduction, and legalisation is focused on market value, profit, and actually doesn't then, well, where it's been put in, it typically focuses on those. The main issue is as well, if you try to legalise all drugs in Northern Ireland immediately, imagine the uproar. Step one is decriminalisation. Step two is cannabis legalisation. Then you go on down that pillar and down that journey. However, we are fighting for the first step because drug decriminalisation is a big stigmatised issue. So that's step one. You can't just jump in a country like ours to legalisation straight away. You start off with the problem is just harm reduction.
Opposition to respond.
We've been accused on this side of supporting the status quo, but actually, we're for radical change.
Quote that. Somebody quote that.
That's radical.
Can't go back and forth. Can't go back and forth. Yes, Brian.
Well, I mean, anyway. So no, I think the point's been.
Quiet, please.
I think the point that I'm just trying to get across in my speech is that even if, like, you can oppose this motion without necessarily being a prohibitionist, as it were. And so I was sort of proposing in my speech that there are two alternative legitimate drug policies, but I've lost my train of thought. I want to go for a pint.
Question for the opposition.
No, I still want to go for a pint.
You're always the one that wants to continue the questions. I don't know what's got into you today.
It's only 9 o'clock.
I'm hurrying up as fast as I can. Right, question for the opposition. Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Adam, Race. So with a lot of that, until we brought up like the legalization idea, which like, yeah, that's great for what I'm going to talk about here, but it felt like with the rest of the year, it was like, oh, well, even if we have this, then, you know, they can help them in prisons, right? Form of those things.
Slightly, sorry.
That you need like more reform for things like prisons and stuff for people who have addiction issues. Well, the problem though still stands that those people going to prison or getting a criminal record in general are going to have trouble getting jobs. Many of them might even have felony charges then. They'll never be able to work the same way a lot of other people do. The community and other things will stigmatize them. So what's really your solution without decriminalization to handling how it ruins people's lives if they have an addiction issue? In many cases, it's just a mental health issue.
I can come back to that one. Yes, if we want to improve all that sort of side of things, I think there's a, I get back to the topic of tonight's debate, but I think there's a huge problem in society how we treat people when they come out of prison, and the lack of support for, like, loads of people go into prison and they've not got good literacy and numeracy skills, and they sort of go in there and don't learn anything whilst they're in there. And I watched a good series over Christmas of what it was around to it, sort of being part of it. So yeah, basically, if we want to prevent it ruining people's lives but still not decriminalise, you can reform the prison system as a whole and laws regarding when people come out of prison and support the prisoners so that it's not like a life-ruining thing when you go to prison. That's what I think about it.
Proposition to respond.
It's almost as if that's the entirety of what we were arguing. And the opposition tried to paint it like we were encouraging everyone to become rude for euphoria. You know, we actually addressed the argument, the opposition didn't.
Any abstention questions that are actual abstention questions? Yes, state your name for the minutes, please.
Hello, Christopher Lynch. I don't know if it's an abstention question, but I missed my chance to ask the proposition.
That's not an abstention. You owe me a pint after this. Right. Any actual abstention questions? Please say no so we can
do
go.
one if you need it.
No. So, thank you very much to all of our speakers.
There's one there.
That's not going to be an abstention question. Yes.
So, what you were talking about how bad things are in prison, so how there should be reforms within prison. I would completely agree with you. So I'm not even joking from would you not say it would be more effective to have people that go to prison have to work a trade or a job where they can actually learn a skill, something along these lines, instead of just being a wonder camp that they can go to and sit with all their criminal friends and learn to be a better criminal?
Can I ask how that's relevant at all to the motion?
Both can talk
Yeah.
about the prison.
It was brilliant for prison before we said
That's fair enough.
Okay, proposition first.
First off, whenever you're in prison, whether that be high fine plus grade, you are offered classes from Belfast Men. They actually come up and teach you so you can learn trades like welding and stuff like that. There are literally classes, nurse counselling. However, only 3 out of 1 block of cellmates, which is usually 24, get a chance to go these courses and introduced on that. Whenever you have an addiction, you're on cell watch, which means you're in your cell 24 hours a day. You're not allowed to interact with boys in the garden. Counselling is 1 counsellor for a prison of 380 women, which is the full capacity. So yeah, that they do get treats when they go out, but there's a stigma when they go out. However, getting one of those classes is extremely hard, and addictions are still not treated, even with the mental health program they currently have in prison isn't actually used. So yeah.
Opposition to respond very quickly, 30 seconds max.
I mean, we have completely said the prison reform could bring about something like that. The issue with what Ali pointed out isn't that it's a decriminalisation issue. It's the fact that we don't have enough money towards proper support programs for prisons. We've offered proper reforms for prisons. So let's put more money into it. Let's properly reform the system. Let's not just leave people stranded. It isn't just an issue of people walk out and can't get jobs because of destigmatisation. We can decriminalise. There's still going to be a stigma towards drug users. So if we're going to we can still reform. We can still do it. Do we just need more money?
Thank you very much. So it is now, finally, if you want to get out of here, you better shut up for 2 minutes. What was that? So it's now time to turn our attention to the vote on speaker ability. So this is not a vote on how you personally feel about the motion. This is a vote on which side you think has spoken best at tonight's debate. So if you think this side of the House has spoken the best at tonight's debate, you can raise your hand now.
What's this vote for, sir?
Speaker ability.
Let me change the No, that's all right.
Terrible. All's liquors.
Fucking heads.
We're a revolutionary Marxist.
If you think this side of the House has spoken best at tonight's debate, you can raise your hand now.
Could be worse, folks.
What about last one? Yeah, exactly. Last bastions.
No, but you're
If you wish to abstain on tonight's motion, you can raise your hand now.
That's rather
Lions,
Thank you. Do we have the final numbers for tonight's debate?
41 votes for the proposition, 16 votes for the opposition, and 4 abstentions, so the proposition has it.
Thank you very much. You can follow one of our council members if you're new down to the pub now. Thank God. To Lavery's, so you can follow him down there.